What's happening, party people? Welcome to Punchboard Party. My name is Daniel, and in this video we are finally talking about Red Rising. This board game has been with me since the beginning of this channel, and so it is no small thing that I am finally getting to review Red Rising. So without any further ado, I'm about to tell you 6 things about Red Rising. Number 1, multi-use cards take on a whole new meaning in this game. I love games where you can use cards for multiple purposes. Every game has a different way that they use multi-use cards, but Red Rising uses multi-use cards in a way that I've never seen before. What I mean is that you are going to use these cards in both of their intended uses within the same game fairly often. On cards, you're going to have their core point value in the top left-hand corner. Then on the bottom, you're going to have their end game scoring condition. So it might be if this card is with another card, gain 10 points, or for every blue card, gain 5 points, that kind of thing. But they're also going to have what's called a deployability, so that when you play the card onto the board, you're going to get that action. And what happens in this game, and something that I didn't realize, is that you're going to play a card down for its deployability, and then in another turn you might come around and pick that card back up to your hand again so that you can use the same deployability again, and you might come around again and put it in your hand, and this time for good, so that you can use its endgame scoring ability. And this is because typically the deployability and the endgame scoring go hand in hand. So while a card might say for its deployability that you gain an orange card, the endgame scoring might be that you get points for every orange card in your hand. So it happens more often than not that you want to get cards that you've used for your deployability back into your hand for the highest score possible. And so not only does this game have multi-use cards, but multi-use cards that you get to use over and over again for different purposes. And I think that's really cool. 2, you're not always going to get to play this game using your preferred play style. There are a ton of factions in this game that all play in a different way, and they're represented by colors. But because there's so many cards in this deck, you're not always going to be able to rely on the fact that you're going to see your favorite factions come up often enough to employ their strategy. So for myself, I love the blue cards. I love the pilots. I just love getting a lot of victory points. So what the blue cards often rely on is you moving up the flight track, which gets you a bunch of points anyway, and then the blue cards score you points based on how high you are up on the fleet track. The cool thing about the pilots is they often have a similar way of scoring, and so that if you get a few of them and you've moved on the fleet track, you are scoring a bunch of points for just doing kind of one simple strategy throughout the game. So while there's a lot of opportunity for synergy, especially within the same faction type, it's not often that you see these factions running on all cylinders because of how thick the deck is. So I might find a blue card and get that into my hand, and then I don't see another blue for the rest of the game. And so a strategy that I set out to accomplish just goes belly up. So what I find most frustrating about this is that I have the experience of playing with my favorite play style in this game and doing really well utilizing the pilots and everything just clicking together and getting me the victory. So I know that the way I prefer to play works in this game if the right cards come out. And so as I'm playing, I'm always leaning towards the pilot cards, but since the one time I did really well with them, they don't come up enough for me to utilize them in a full-blown blue or pilot faction strategy. So I know it's possible to play with your preferred playstyle in this game and that it works out really well. It's a lot of fun when you get to do that, but it's nowhere close to being guaranteed. Number 3, and this is where orange and gray cards become essential. Orange cards at the end of the game can be used as any other specific character name card, and grays at the end of the game can be used for any specific color of card. And so this comes in really handy when you are building your hand of cards and you are trying to optimize the amount of points that you're going to get at the end of the game. So if a card says that it is worth such and such victory points for being with Jackal, and Jackal is nowhere to be seen, and you have no hope of him ever popping up out of that giant deck, you can simply gain an orange card into your hand and let that card stand in for Jackal. And the same goes for if another card is looking for a specific card color, you can use gray and get a gray into your hand, and instead of looking for blues when there's no blues to be found, you can use gray to substitute as your blue. And the best part about these factions is that they are going to score points in their own ways, apart from how they're going to help other cards score points. So you can really ramp up the synergy by optimizing the orange or the gray card itself for what it's looking for, and allow it to be the thing that helps you score points or optimize points on another card. So I've been finding that one of the best things to do in this game is to really leverage the gray and the orange cards to round out your hand and get the winning combination in this game. 4. The board is a great addition to this type of game. So you might already know that Red Rising was inspired by another game called Fantasy Realms, which is all about building a hand of cards that synergize together to get the most victory points. But that's all the game is. And so while Red Rising has that game at its core, it's also introduced a board. And this board does two things that enhances the original idea of Fantasy Realms. First off, the board makes for a lot more tension when you are playing cards to and from your hand, because there's 4 different places for you to deploy cards, and hence there's 4 places where you can draw cards from, and you can also draw cards from the main deck. But because of these spaces on the board where you place cards, there's this ability to cover up cards that other players might be looking for so they can't easily get at them. Or you might want to draw a card from a certain area to get that space's special ability, but you don't want to do that because you know you're uncovering a card that an opponent wants. So it adds this extra layer of strategy to the card play that is really fun and exciting. More importantly, the other thing the board introduces is a way to totally ignore endgame scoring conditions on cards that require cards to be with specific cards. You now also have the option to be moving up a fleet track, or to be gaining influence at the Institute, or to be collecting a resource called helium. And because of these things, you are able to focus solely on cards that get you endgame scoring points for having tokens on the board, your fleet marker up on the fleet track, or having been collecting a bunch of helium. You can score endgame victory points for having a bunch of those. So I love that the board creates other scoring opportunities when the card combo thing just isn't working in your favor. 5. The starting hand in this game is a really hard hurdle to get over when you're first playing the game or introducing it to new people. There's cards of all sorts of different colors. There's all sorts of text and numbers on these cards. Each card has text for deployability. It has text for endgame scoring. It has numbers for the core base scoring power of the card. There's just a lot going on. Not to mention trying to figure out how these cards could possibly synergize. And when you're looking at your starting hand, you start to realize very quickly that these cards that you already have might not synergize well at all. Or maybe some of them do, and you're not sure whether you should keep those cards in your hand for the entire game, which limits the options you have for deploying them and using them for their ability and picking up other cards to create a different hand altogether. So right from the beginning of the game, you have a ton of things to try and figure out. What cards am I going to use for their deploy abilities? What cards here can I use for their endgame scoring? Are there any cards here I want to use? Should I be trying to draw a bunch of new cards so that we get more cards into play here? How do the cards that are already on the board complement the cards I have in my hand? It is information overload. And it can make for a really slow start to this game. So this is a game that could very well land flat for new players, and if people don't give it a second or third chance, they'll never get to see this game at its full potential. 6. Even though you are often at the mercy of what cards are drawn in this game, it is undeniably fun when you have a hand of cards and you're asked to figure out the new puzzle that a new hand of cards deals to you. Every game I am thrilled to see what my starting hand is and to see what cards are out on the board and try and figure out how to get the most points out of all of those combinations. Not to mention new cards being introduced throughout the game that add wrinkles and twists on strategies or tactics that you were trying to implement. This game is nothing short of fun. It's not perfect by any means, and there's lots of opportunities to be frustrated because the right cards aren't coming up, or the cards that are perfect are being taken by other players or being covered up by other players and you can't access them easily. There are times where you are too late to pivot on a strategy and you end up just running yourself into the ground. But despite all of that, the chance, the opportunity to pull off an amazing high score in this game is a thrill that is totally worth it. I haven't felt the way that I feel playing this game since I first played Dominion many years ago, with just having a hand of cards and being told, make the most of it, kid. And this game captures that feeling to a T. And so I am loving Red Rising. It is a favorite of mine. I can't stop thinking about it. I just want to be playing it all the time. There we have it, party people. 6 things about Red Rising. Thank you so much for joining me for this review. If you played Red Rising, it's all the rage right now. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And until next time, party people, have the best day.